Welcome to Creating Buzz, the joy, ease, and challenge of supporting pollinators, a program brought to you through a partnership with Ames Public Library, Story County Conservation, and the City of Ames Pollinator Committee. I'm Megan. I'm the Adult Services Manager here at the library. The library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas, which we do through diverse and inclusive resources and programs. We invite you to join us for future programs, which you can learn more about through our current issue of Page 1 or by signing up for our events email. Our current Page 1 has a lovely photo of a pollinator on the front. And if you haven't seen the exhibit in the library's entryway, please take a look at that on your way out. Today's session is being recorded and will be posted to the Ames Public Library YouTube channel after the program ends. For those of you joining us online, we'll be muting your microphones during the presentation. So if you have any questions, please submit those via the chat function, which you can find a link to on your screen. I'll monitor that chat to make sure those questions get asked at an appropriate time. If you get bumped out of today's event, just follow the original link to get back to us, and I'll let you back in. Because of our folks on Zoom, if you have a question, I will run a microphone to you. I also just wanted to briefly share some information about the Ames Seed Library, which is in the back of this room. I know a number of you already sort of engaged with it. That was a joint project that was created last spring. Seeds are available anytime the library is open. We pulled out some pollinator-specific seeds for today's event. But we have a whole range of fruits and vegetables and flowers that you can be borrowed at any time. And with that, I will please welcome Laura, who will introduce the pollinator program and our speaker.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm so happy to have all of you able to join us here today to learn more about pollinators. Before we get started, I did want to give a big thank you to the Ames Public Library for all of their help coordinating and hosting the event, and also Story County Conservation, who very generously provided seeds, native seeds for the library here. So thanks to them. And again, my name is Laura. I'm a volunteer for the City of Ames Pollinator Friendly Community Plan. This is a thing that's quite a source of pride for the City of Ames. We're the first in the nation to have this sort of a plan to become more pollinator friendly. There's a lot of goals and very specific tasks, very action-oriented pollinator plan that is organized around the areas of education, what we are doing here today, policy, research, and partnerships. The vision for this is that Ames could really become a leader in creating pollinator-friendly habitat that would help not only birds, bees, butterflies, but also we humans to have a healthy, diverse environment. So the success of all this, though, of course, depends on what each of us and all of us do together as a community. And so again, that's why we're so excited to have you here today. You're going to learn a whole lot about pollinators. You might have noticed the QR code on this slide. If you scan that, it will take you to our web pages that have a whole lot of more resources for you. So with that, I am very happy to introduce our speaker today, who we're so fortunate to have, Jamie Beyer. He is going to be a wonderful fountain of expertise and knowledge for us. He's a lifetime master gardener. He's the legislative representative for the Iowa Honey Producers Association, the president of the Central Iowa Beekeepers Association, and also the recipient of the Spencer Award, which is actually quite a prestigious award that really recognizes how much Jamie has done in terms of our environment and sustainable agriculture here in Iowa. So with that, help me welcome Jamie Beyer.
So anyway, I'm going to start off by thanking the Pollinator Plan Committee for inviting me to do this presentation. So I think, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So I want to thank them for this opportunity. It's something that I really want to spread the word about. I really want to talk about the importance of the topics we're going to talk about today. So a great opportunity. I spent a lifetime learning about ecosystems. I'm 74. I spent seriously almost every day of my life thinking about ecosystems, nature, I'm a fish and wildlifer, master's degree a long time ago in fisheries and wildlife. And I have all kinds of hobbies dealing with nature. So thank you for that. Now, I also spent a lifetime adding ecosystems into landscapes. You're going, whoa, what are you talking about? I spent a lifetime installing and maintaining water gardens, water features in landscapes. And that's a whole nother ecosystem that people can add to their landscape to bring in a wide variety of new critters that normally aren't there. It's amazing when you bring water in, you bring in a wide variety of critters you've never seen before in your own landscapes. One in particular are toads. Toads? When you add water, toads reproduce in water. And when you add water, you naturally reproduce a lot of toads. When those little toad poles hop out, those are all great natural predators in your garden. So I've had people tell me that they pay neighborhood kids $1 a toad to bring in predators to keep the slugs off their hostas. What a great idea. If you add water, the toads show up on their own. So anyway, enough of that. So one thing I like a lot, and I'm not sure it's going to work in this environment so well, is I like comments and questions a lot. I don't mind being heckled. Ed's right up front here to do that job, but so please add those comments and questions as I go along. Yes.
About toads.
Yes.
I grew up like in Ames by the Munn Woods. And when I was a kid, yes, I made like Lego houses for my toads and stuff. And then I let them go, obviously. But I have seen so few of them now. I mean, it's I wanted to share it with my kids when I was growing up, but we're talking, I'm pretty old, so we're talking like 50 years ago. And my kids very rarely found a toad. Once or twice.
Well, one of the things about toads is that they're a terrestrial amphibian. A lot of our amphibians are more aquatic amphibians, whereas toads do not have to have water to survive. They do not have to have water on their skin, whereas frogs, they have to have moist skin for them to survive. And so when you see frogs, there's usually some high moisture environment that the frogs are in. But with toads, they don't have to have high moisture, but they do need mulch to burrow down into, loose soil to burrow into, that kind of thing. So when we talk about the things we're going to be talking about today, creating the mulches that are necessary in our landscape provides good habitat for toads. So having mulch, that kind of thing, loose soil is what toads love. So, okay. Yes.
Did you say that toads eat slugs?
They do. Great natural predator.
Frogs eat slugs?
Yeah, they would. Yep. The beauty of toads, though, is it's a terrestrial amphibian, so they're everywhere. Whereas frogs are more specific to a moisture environment. So, the great Russ O'Hara was a hosta hybridizer in Des Moines. And I asked him what he did to control slugs in his hostas. I didn't see any slug damage on his garden. He says he pays neighborhood kids $1 a toad. There's all kinds of toads in. So anyway, nothing to do with pollinators there, but I like the questions and comments. So anyway, let's get into this talk. And I'm going to get pretty emotional at times, that's me. So it's very important to be talking about these issues. So I suppose let me turn the lights down a little bit here. What are pollinators? It seems kind of obvious that it's, that pollinators include our butterflies, right? Like monarchs. Monarchs are what we consider a gateway insect. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But then there's bumblebees, hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are also a pollinator. Anything that visits a flower from flower to flower can transfer pollen from flower to flower, and that's a pollinator. Okay, so hummingbirds are good pollinators. Hundreds of all kinds of native bees, like mason bees, hundreds of species of native bees. I don't know the exact number of species, but there are a lot. A lot of them are little sweat bees, but mason bees are a good example of that. And there's people putting up mason bee houses to encourage them into their own landscape. So, and of course, honeybees, that's another gateway insect. And if you saw on my introductory slide, I have a lot of honeybee hives. I got hives right next to Ed's place. and he loves those bees. They're a great addition to his landscape. And so I consider honeybees as another gateway insect. Again, I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Any insect or critter that visits a flower can be a pollinator. Okay. Now, what critter would it be that visits a flower? What?
Rabbits.
Rabbit can. They can. That's not normal. How about bats? Some bat species will visit flowers. Even a fox that visits from flower to flower, even a fox can be technically a pollinator. That's their not normal thought process, but seriously, anything that visits the flower from flower to flower can be a pollinator. So when I say bees today, I'm including all pollinators. It's just easier to just say bees, right? Okay, so what's a gateway insect? Anybody tell me what a gateway insect is? Let's talk about it then. It's a species of critter that everyone knows well. Like the monarch, like the butterfly, monarch butterflies, like the honeybees. They make news, whereas most other critters do not. You know, if we talk about the regal flitterary, for example, an endangered species of butterfly, it's hard to say, let alone who knows about the regal flitterary. But if you say honeybee, everybody knows it. Everybody. So that opens the door or the gate to relate problems that these insects face. When I talk about the plight of honeybees, everybody will relate to that. When I talk about the plight of a regal flitterary, it's just a little bit more elusive. So it just opens the door to your mind in thinking about pollinators, okay? The public media and policymakers are very interested in these headlines. They are. They pick up on it. Anything that affects the monarch butterfly, anything that affects the honeybee, the media loves it. They gobble it up. They make the news. So now, since I started keeping honeybees 10 years ago, I started learning about the problems that honeybees face. And it's been many. And I get very emotional, like I said, about it and how to protect them. My goal is to try to change people's attitudes about helping our pollinators, what people can do. And this Ames pollinator plan fits right into my goals as well as a lot of your goals in here. This is very important to us. It affects our economy and it affects our ecosystems. Huge. So why are we taking time to talk about plants and habitat for our pollinators? I hate to bring up anything negative, but we're facing the fact that almost every population of bee species is declining. There's very few that I can think of that are not declining. Okay? Pretty sad state of affair. Okay? And I hate to be a doomsayer type thing, and I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm just going to dwell upon the fact that we can do something about it. Okay? Bumblebees, native bees, many species of butterflies, like monarchs, are declining. So even our honeybees are declining. Just here the last month, it's been reported out in the California almond orchard where commercial beekeepers take their bees to pollinate almonds. They're experiencing 65%, 75% losses of their colonies. Think about that. 65, 75% loss. It's huge. Can you imagine a cattle producer losing over half his cattle in a year? Can you imagine that? What it would devastate. It devastates the industry, and it's going to devastate the future of some of our pollinating efforts. So pretty sad. The only reason honeybees are doing okay is because of the intense interest in how it adds to our economy, as well as the intense interest the media provides for them, and people care about honeybees, like we were talking about. So I'm seeing a lot of interest in people picking up the hobby of keeping bees. A lot of people are doing that. It's not an easy thing to do to be successful at it. I can tell you it's a lot of work. Ed can verify that. I'm going by his place almost every day sometimes to check on my bees and do something for them. Okay. So there is an economic benefit to it. So there's a lot of people trying to keep the population up. Okay. So what's killing them? What's killing them? It just, geez, we got to know the reasons why for us to do anything about it. So it's briefly pesticides, fungicides, and it's fungicides too, by the way. Bees produce a fungus to feed their babies. It's a bee bread that's used fungus in it. So fungicides can actually harm bee colonies. Diseases, and finally, loss of habitat and diversity. We can do something about all of them, but if we recognize the issues, but habitat loss is a very, very high, and it's getting worse. And I'll focus primarily on habitat today with you. Okay, I'm going to dwell a little bit on some insecticides, but mostly it's going to be habitat discussion. Okay, so it's in this is where my mind goes. I haven't shared this with you, Laura, but I'm going through what I call compassion fatigue, where I am so distraught over all the different issues. And it's a fatigue I'm experiencing. And I get overwhelmed by it. What can I do? And I get depressed. And so doing this presentation today helps me get through my compassion fatigue. Working towards saving our habitat and saving diversity helps me get through this fatigue. I don't know whether any of you are experiencing it, but it's very prevalent in my mind. Okay, so in nature, diversity is the key to stability. Actually, diversity is the key to stability in almost every aspect of our life. Not just in nature, but in our own daily lives. It's important to have diversity in our lives, okay? But I'm going to focus on diversity in nature. If you have more diverse habitat, you're gonna have a more stable ecosystem, okay? It seems simple, but we are going down the road of having a lot of monocultures. Monocultures of green grass lawns. That's the only thing in there is bluegrass, maybe some rye in there. But the point I'm trying to make is there's no diversity there. Whereas if you have a landscape with more diversity, it's a lot more stable. Diversity includes sources of pollen. That's the protein source that our bees need. They need pollen for the protein source. Sources of nectar. That's the carbohydrate. That's the sugars that they need. So they need both pollen and nectar. They also need sources of other nutrients, like honeybees produce a product called propolis, and that's got a bee glue, and it's available out there in certain types of plants, but they need those nutrients for propolis. Sources of water. This sounds simple, but there's some landscapes there's very little water available to them. Protection from the wind, extreme weather, protection from predators, homes to reside in. There's a lot of bees that lay their eggs in hollow stems of plants. And if those stems are all cut off, there's no longer a overwintering home for our bee, some of our native bees. So this is what the key is, stability here, okay? What can you do for creating diversity? And this is the fun part of what we're going to be talking about today. What can you do? Okay? You can do it in 3 ways. First, there's the easy technique. I love the easy part. You don't have to do much. Then there's the hard part, the challenging part. Laura helped me with that term, the challenging part, the hard part, maybe changing your attitude about some of the plants. You'll see what I mean in a bit. Matter of fact, you're going to be maybe upset with me on some of the things I'm going to say. So, and then there's the fun part, the joyful part of planting great plants. We got a whole bunch of seeds back here that you can take home and plant these plants in your own landscape to help our pollinators. That's the fun part. And then there's the easy technique of spreading the words. Okay? Shout it out, the importance of this. So tell your neighbors, tell your government officials that you've elected, really scream it out loud. Okay? Let's talk about the easy part first. And then I'm going to bring in a little bit of hard stuff. Okay? Changing those attitudes. This is a quote from the former Iowa honey queen, the more you know, the less you mow. And when she said that, it just opened my eyes. I go, I used to be the type of guy that mowed his yard one way one week, the other way the next week, sprayed every fall, made sure I didn't have any broad. I was that guy. Like most of us have been. I'd say almost every one of us have been in that road. I've been talking to Ed up here about leaving some plants, and he's got to convince his wife. But the point I'm trying to make is the more you know, the less you mow. I want to carry that message a bit further. The more you know, the more you like weeds. Weeds, seriously, weeds. So it seems a majority of Americans want that golf course green looking landscape. As I drive across anywhere in Ames, and Ames is just like a typical community, you see the perfectly mowed bluegrass lawns. There's not a blade of grass out of place. Everything is the exact same height. It looks beautiful. I beg to differ. To me, there's no diversity there. There's nothing for nature in that landscape. Okay, it's a monoculture, no diversity. So the first type of plants I'm going to mention that are bee friendly are weeds. I'm going to go down this road a little bit. Okay, the ones that are easy to plant are already there. They're already there. The dandelions, the violets. We'll talk about that a little bit more here. No spraying, no hand weeding. Perhaps the most important is not polluting our environment with so many chemicals to get rid of those broadleaves. Okay. Oh, is this going to be hard? So, dandelions and wild violet. Unbelievably huge nectar sources for our pollinators. Yet, we can't stand to have them in our yards. Can't stand it. Why is that? It's a mentality that's got to be perfect bluegrass. How about creeping Charlie? I've been talking to Ed up here just a little bit ago about in his landscape, my bees, I have bees right next to his field, his lawn, huge creeping Charlie bed. This last spring, I got so many good pictures of my bees and other bees working that creeping Charlie. And they had blue pollen on their back legs. They come into the hive, they had this blue pollen on their legs. What's that coming from? What's coming from creeping Charlie? That's bringing in another diverse source of pollen for them. It's so exciting to see the bees work that creeping Charlie. That's where that picture came from, Ed. Okay. So this is a classic love-hate relationship. What is needed is the hard part of changing attitudes. Remember I said easy to plant and maintain? You don't need very little work there. Just let them go. Okay. Beekeepers always refer to the first dandelion bloom as the start of the nectar season. Seriously, when I don't know how many Facebook postings that beekeepers do, they show a picture of a dandelion and it's the beginning of the nectar season. Our bees made it through winter because the dandelions are blooming. So I don't know of a beekeeper that really is a genuine beekeeper that sprays his dandelions anymore. I would never spray dandelions personally. And that attitude changed when I started keeping bees. So, okay. Some are turned into a love and then some are a scourge. So what about milkweeds? I remember as a kid growing up, I walked a lot of beans as a kid. And the farmer says, I don't want any milkweeds in that field. I don't want cocklebur. I don't want butterprip. I don't want milkweeds, especially. Get rid of those. Nowadays, been a huge shift in milkweeds, right? We're planting them. I'll put money on it. There's some milkweed species back there and plant. Whereas, seriously, 15, 20 years ago, nobody thought about planting milkweeds. Nobody. So it is possible for an attitude change. It is possible. But only if we talk about it and promote it. So then there's weeds and trees like honeysuckle that has invaded our woodlands. That is a scourge. Unfortunately, honeybees love it. A lot of pollinators love honeysuckle, unfortunately, but it is a scourge. The honeysuckle invades our woodlands to the point that the ephemerals, the low-growing plants in our woodlands, we don't have as many of those, and those are important for our pollinators also. Honeysuckle needs to go. So I'm not promoting that kind of weed, of course. We got to get rid of those invasives. What about native thistles? Almost everybody I know wants to get rid of thistles because they hurt you when you brush up against them. They're a very important plant for our bumblebees, especially. I don't see too many honeybees on our native thistles. Why would that be? Anybody answer that? That's true. That's a good point. That's probably part of it. But say again. Oh, I'm sorry. She says honeybees are not native, and that is true. Honeybees are not native here. They've been here since the early 1600s, by the way, but they are not native. But the proboscis of a honeybee is only just so long. The nectaries of a thistle is very deep. So a bumblebee can get to those nectaries. Butterflies can get to them. You see a lot of our monarchs on thistle blooms too, but they can get down into those nectaries, poking down.
What's the difference between a native and a non-native thistle?
Ooh, that's tough. You have to look it up. You have to look it up. Okay. Actually, any of our non-native thistles, the musk thistle, that's pretty distinctive, but you have to look it up and understand. I could just do a presentation on our natives and non-natives. Good question, though. She was asking, how do you tell the difference between native and non-native thistles? And there's several. Canada thistle, not a native. Okay, that helps you right off the bat. And that's a scourge. I would never, ever promote Canada thistle. It invades, and it's a very invasive plant. Okay. Okay. How about Dutch clover? This is a plant that I would promote planting in your own landscape. It's easy. They're selling Dutch clover seed like you wouldn't believe nowadays. And I've known beekeepers, I'm telling their secret now. I've known beekeepers go out and buy a bag of Dutch clover seed and spread it in medians, spread it everywhere. I love it. They're spending dollars on this Dutch clover seed. Now, so bees love it. Actually, the honey that comes from Dutch clover, some of the best honey out there. They call it clover honey.
Provides nitrogen for your lawn.
Ed says it provides nitrogen for your lawn too. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Ed. That's a good comment. Sweet clover, another really good nectar source for producing good honey. And our native bees like it too. When sweet clover is in full bloom, it's just solid pollinators on it. So now I used to think sweet clover, Dutch clover was a scourge. But my attitude has changed. Okay. Okay, here's a True Green ad that I saw, and it really hit home with me when I saw this ad. The perfect lawn is only a quote away. So what's a perfect lawn? Everybody thinks a perfect lawn is that golf course look. We've got to get away from that. Got to get away from it. They kill all the weeds. They kill all the broadleaves. Besides, they're coating your landscape with all kinds of poison. These chemicals, these herbicides, and insecticides, by the way, are poisoning our landscape. They kill all those dandelions, Dutch clover, violets. They're all gone. It's the perfect lawn, right? We've got to change it somehow, okay? This is the American way. Actually, I've heard that it's the English way. I think it's an English tradition to have that perfectly mowed everything. It's the English way of gardening. But I want to develop an American way of gardening, okay? Where we embrace these weeds, okay? They're more caring about their golf course style chemically grown lawns than they care about nature. Seriously, they care more about that versus having beautiful nature right out their door. Now I'm going to get emotional. Sorry. No. Okay, now let's talk about the fun part. That's probably the main reason most of you came today. You didn't want to hear all this negative stuff, right? Let's talk about the fun part, what you want to plant. Okay. Basic principles in choosing plants for pollinators, okay? Choose plants that are native, okay? Now, there are a few non-natives that I promote, and I'll talk about a few of them here, but most of the plants that we promote are native. Why is that? Why do we want to promote native plants? Because our native pollinators have evolved with the native plants. Those native plants, if you put in, I'm going to give you an example. I know Todd Burris back there would be right on target with this example. If you plant a ginkgo tree, how many pollinators would chew on a ginkgo leaf? I think I've heard 4. You plant an oak tree, how many pollinators chew on an oak tree? 500 some, right, Todd? 500 some of our native pollinators not only chew on it, lay their eggs on it. There's all kinds of insects on it, just not even more than our native pollinators. There's other kinds of very important insects, native insects that are on our oaks. Ginkgo or oak? Oak tree, okay? So plant natives, okay? Choose a plant that can provide a nectar source and a pollen source at other times of the year. Source of propolis, all are needed to survive, but I like to talk about providing nectar and pollen sources at more unusual times of the year. And you're going to hear about that in just a little bit more here. A diversity of these sources is critical. There's that word again, diversity. Remember, diversity is the key to stability in nature. So more diversity you have. If you plant a solid row of oaks, it's good. But plant some oaks, plant some service berries, plant diversity. Plant more than just a solid. And actually, it's not only, it's more pleasing to the eye to have more diversity too. So don't just plant a single species, plant a lot of species. More than just a bur oak. Okay, plant a red oak, plant white oak also, okay? So, nectar sources and pollen sources are very scarce, like right now. Our pollinators are emerging from their winter homes, and right now there's very little nectar and very little pollen source. Okay? So if you can plant a plant that provides a very early nectar and pollen source, that helps our pollinators a lot. It gets them through the winter better. And also, if you plant a nectar and pollen source that's late season, that's also a very good plant because late season pollens nectar sources are rare also. So mid-season, we all want to plant mid-season nectar sources, pollen sources, but it's so much more available in mid-season. Make sense? So plant early in nectar, okay? So, okay, more basic principles in choosing these. Oops, what'd I do? Okay, sorry, hit the wrong button. That woke everybody up, right? So, type of plants that best utilize the given space should be given priority. What plant is that? These are the trees and even shrubs. Why is that? Maybe tell me why a tree utilizes space better than prairie trees, a forest. Why would that be potentially better than a prairie? Yes. There you go. She says because it's vertical. You not only have the horizontal space, but you also have vertical space. You're taking advantage of more of a three-dimensional aspect. You've got the whole canopy of that tree is available as a nectar and pollen source. And the prairie is just basically a horizontal source, basically. Shrubs provide a little bit of vertical space too. So think about that. They provide both the vertical and horizontal. So I like to promote trees. Remember, diversity though. Trees along with prairie. Both are important, but plant trees. The unfortunate thing about trees, it takes longer for them to produce a nectar and pollen source. So it just takes more time. Okay? So, provide diversity, both sides, okay? Okay, I'm going to go over a few plants. I could go on and on about all the different kinds of plants, but this willows are a great early source of nectar and pollen. Willows. And these 6 species of willows are what honeybees like in particular. and all of our pollinators. But willows, seriously, when pussy willows are coming out, everybody cuts pussy willows and puts it in a vase on their counter. You see that pollen that's on that pussy willow, those bees are loving it. Right now, my pussy willows are starting to bud out. They're not showing much yet. Seriously, here in a couple weeks, I'm going to see bees covering my willows. Okay, so plant willows. Cottonwoods. That's a native tree that, you wouldn't think, well, what's so important about cotton? What's so important about cottonwoods? They provide the propolis necessary for bees. It's been shown, researchers have shown that on a cottonwood bud, it's a very waxy bud. I don't know whether you actually looked at a cottonwood bud, but it's very waxy on the tip. That's the source of propolis for our bees. They go and gather that off those buds. Okay. What about sugar maple, silver maple, and sugar maple? But silver maple is an early bloomer. When I see those little red blooms, Al, there's bees all over that. Bees all over it. Okay? Silver maple, early bloomer. Okay, what are other woody plants? Here's a good list of them. All trees here. I love wild plum, by the way. It's only been, my partner of 45 years, she planted wild plum. And I go, what are you planting that for? 25 years ago, what are you planting wild plum for? That's just a kind of weed tree. It is a huge source of nectar and pollen for bees, but it's also a great critter home, not only for bees, but for all kinds of wildlife. I've seen coyotes eat the plums. You see coyote droppings with plum pits in them, fox droppings with plum pits. It's a huge, raccoons love it. So it's not only for our pollinators, but for our big vertebrates as well. Okay. So these are some, the crab apples, apple trees, peaches. A lot of people want me to bring bees in to put near their orchards to make sure that their orchards are pollinated well. So bees do love apple trees, all the prunus varieties. Okay. Okay. Red raspberries, blackberries. I'll never forget watching a bee, and I took time one day just to slow down and watch a bee work a blossom, a raspberry blossom. And it was red raspberry. This honeybee was worked it over, sticking his proboscis down into that raspberry. Now, in a raspberry, there's many, many different nectaries on a raspberry. When you eat a raspberry, there's a little seed in each. There's many seeds in there. Well, each one of those seeds was a nectary. And so the honeybee will work that blossom. And spend quite a bit of time working it. And I'm watching this one blossom. That bee flew off. Another bee came in, worked the same blossom. Oh, there couldn't be any more nectar in there. But there was. That bee left, another bee came, same blossom. So that raspberry blossom was replenishing that nectar source on a very fast basis. So when you have honeybees or any kind of pollinators near your raspberry patch, you're going to have big raspberries, big ones. So I'm getting emotional about that. So how about melons and cucumbers, squash, pumpkins, soybeans? Yes, even soybeans. They've shown an increased yield in soybeans near apiaries, near locations where commercial beekeepers keep their hives. They've shown an increase in yield in soybeans. Okay. Alfalfa can be a great nectar source. However, we harvest our alfalfa before it blooms. Actually, that's the stage when most farmers want to cut the alfalfa before it starts blooming. So unfortunately, alfalfa can't be the nectar source that could be if we just let it go longer, but that's not the best stage for a farmer to harvest it at. So clovers, great nectar sources. Crown vetch, a very invasive plant, is also a great nectar source. I would never promote crown vetch, but it is a good nectar source. Okay. Okay, here we're talking about changing the attitude, the milkweed change. Butterfly milkweed. Every gardener I know knows about butterfly milkweed. It is such an intense orange. It's a great bloomer. Monarchs love it. All of our pollinators love it too. But butterfly milkweed is a gorgeous plant. You gotta have it in your own landscape. You just got to. So now this particular bloom here is butterfly milkweed. This other pod here is common milkweed. It's not butterfly milkweed. So that is common milkweed pods, which is a great monarch attractor too. But I just wanted to show you the difference in the pods on butterfly milkweed are similar except narrower and more slender on butterfly milkweed. But they have a pods very similar. Okay. Okay. How about these late bloomers? Goldenrod, great pollinator source. Okay. Russian sage, that's a great landscape plant, by the way. Anybody in here grow Russian sage right now? Yeah, it's a great plant, isn't it? You see it everywhere. You see pollinators all over it in the fall, don't you? It's a late source. So very good. How about New England aster, the different asters? New England aster in particular. Sedums, great late nectar sources. Sedums are. I planted a whole bed of sedums and it's just solid pollinators on that in the fall. Late nectar source. Remember, late. Okay. Okay, this is one you probably haven't heard of before. I hadn't until at the Iowa Arboretum, which I'm very active in the Iowa Arboretum. They have a plant there when it was in full bloom in August, late August. Solid butterflies and bees on it. Solid. It was deafening the sound on top of that tree. Deafening. But it also has a real pretty bark. They call it exfoliating bark. It's a great landscape plant. And it does well here in Iowa. It's not a native. Okay, I want to make sure you understand that. But our pollinators have adapted to this particular plant very, very well. Okay. Yes. Say again. Those pictures are not, but that picture came from the Benton Arboretum. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is they do have a very, very good plant over there. If you want to see one growing, it's a very, very good tree. And it's more like a redbud tree. It's not a big oak tree type plant. It grows more like a redbud tree. Could be multi-stem. You can train it to one stem. But if you cut off the stems at an early stage, but I like to leave it multi-stemmed myself. So I've got about 30 of these planted in my own landscape. Yes.
How long does that one take to grow?
Relatively, I'd call it medium growth rate. I bought several this size. That was 4 years ago. Now they're over my head. 4 years ago. So you got to protect them from rabbits, that kind of thing. So yeah, very good plant. Okay. How about Calamintha nepta? It's not Montrose white, but this is available at our nurseries. This plant, when you have it growing, either in your landscape or in a pot, which you can place on your deck, this is a plant that pollinators love. It'll be solid bees. It has a long bloom period. It's a mid-season bloomer, but once it starts blooming, it blooms right up until frost, actually. So I'd consider a late bloomer too. The point of it is it's easy to grow. It's a perennial. So if you have it in your landscape, it'll regrow the next year. If you have it in a pot, you need to bring it in a situation where you can protect it a little bit because you don't want the pot breaking, freezing. Okay. Calamintha nepta. Okay. Okay. We need you to help our pollinators. I love that thought of a person pointing at you. We need you. Yes.
Which table, which I put in with 3 witch hazels 4 years ago, they've done nothing.
Uh-oh. Now there's a couple varieties of witch hazels. I'm not an expert on them, but there's a couple varieties, and they're a very late season bloomer. So give it a chance. Do you know much more about witch hazels? Anybody? I just know that there's a couple varieties of witch hazels out there. Good question. But we want you, okay? I'm pointing my finger at everybody here. We want you. So gaining some popularity, not mowing as much. Remember the term no mow May? The mayor of Des Moines declared that one time as month of May is no mow May. It's a few years ago. Okay. Unfortunately, this is not an option for most people. Seriously, here in Iowa, if you let it go until June, it'd just be so tall you couldn't even get a mower through it. So, but it does convey a message of not mowing as much. That's the beauty of that no mow May philosophy. Just what needs to be promoted is less mowing at a taller height. That's the important pet message there. Also, if you mow your yard at a taller height, some of the weeds that you may not want growing doesn't do as well. Crabgrass in particular, if you let it grow taller, you have less crabgrass in your yard. If you mow it really short, that's when crabgrass can take over. Now, crabgrass is not a pollinator plant, so I'm not promoting crabgrass. So let's get rid of crabgrass without chemicals, though. Okay, we can get rid of crabgrass by letting the grass grow higher. Simple. Remember, that's the easy part. Okay. Raise your mower deck. Not mowing as often. You don't have to mow as often. I've known people out there every 3 days mowing their yard. I call that recreational mowing. They must love doing it. Can't figure it out. So, okay. It's less work, less expense, reduced exposure to chemicals. Okay. It's, again, easy, cheap. Okay, now I'm going to talk about something that was brought up to me that I discovered myself about ash tree treatments. I like to spread leaves on my garden. Okay. And I like to compost them in. I like to till them into the garden in the fall and let them compost in. I don't spread any fertilizers on my garden. I just use leaves. And I'll put a layer of leaves like that on my garden. I'm trying to convince Jody of doing this. Yeah, I know you do it. But I like to put a layer like that on there and I till. You wouldn't think all that would be tilled in. Seriously, the next spring, you hardly see a leaf. It decomposes so quickly. So there's a guy here in Ames. He's one of those guys that has the monoculture lawn. Everything's perfect. He picks every leaf up. Every day, if there's a leaf that falls, he's out there picking up that leaf. But he's very good about bagging them. I love how clean and simple those bags are. So I'm taking advantage of his technique of cleaning up those leaves. A lot of you may know who I'm talking about, but I'm not going to mention his name. He's a really nice guy, but he's got the mentality that a lot of us have had. And I asked him, can I get your bags of leaves? Would you give me your bags of leaves? Sure, you can have all the bags you want. And I drive by his place almost every day. And so I'm looking at those bags of leaves. This is going to be easy. I'll just throw them in the back of my pickup, spread them on my garden. But when I was talking to him, he had 4 ash trees in his yard, 1 oak tree, 1 red oak. The rest were green ash trees. And they're all alive. I says, are you treating those trees? He goes, yeah, I am. I go, what are you treating them with? He didn't know. He has a chemical company or a tree company come in and treat them. Well, I found out what they treat those ash trees with are a derivative of neonics. Neonics is a systemic insecticide, pulls up into the tree, and anything that chews on those leaves, including emerald ash borer, will die. Okay, but anything that chews on those leaves die. So I told him, I says, I'm no longer interested in your leaves. I don't want those leaves. I don't want to spread those on my garden. Seriously, my vegetables would potentially have neonics in the vegetables. What about the flowers of those plants? That chemical is still in those leaves. I contacted the Xerces Society about this, and they had no idea. This wasn't even on their radar that this could be a problem. So now the recommendation is just compost or put those leaves into a landfill. Wow, what a waste. But it's better than having them in your landscape where pollinators can get to those results of the decomposition of those leaves. Okay? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. The neonics. It can be prevented. It will work. This guy says he spends $300 a tree every 2 years, and he's got 4 trees. So, and those trees are good shade trees. I wouldn't put it past. But it's a huge expense where if he underplanted those trees right now, underplanted with a young tree, seriously, by the time he cuts them down in like 3 or 4 years, I'm going to talk about cutting them down too. So yeah, Paul.
Probably that neonic is also in the nectar.
You're 100% right, Paul. 100% right. It's throughout the whole tree. And it stays in the nectar and leaves for actually, I've heard up to 7 years. 7 years. So I'm getting emotional, sorry. But I never really thought about it before until I started asking this guy for his leaves. I didn't want them anymore. It's scary that those leaves are going into compostable material. It's scary that's happening. So how pervasive is that? I think it's a lot more pervasive than we think. I think it happens a lot more than we think. So I call those trees poison popsicles. Okay? I'm putting it plain and simple, poison popsicles. There's a lot of municipalities out there treating ash trees. I know Ames has done that. Gabby Edwards, our city forester, she's a good friend, and I've been asking her a little bit about it, and I've been trying to tweak her interest in this idea of a poison popsicle. I think this, if we can get to the city of Ames to not treat their ash trees anymore, let them go, let them die. Yeah.
Ash trees, some ash trees develop really so thick. And actually,
Little bit. It's a good question, Jennifer. The thing about let's back up a ways to the Dutch elm disease that we had on our elm trees. Seriously, it went through elm trees like whole avenues, dead elms. I'm old enough, I remember that very, very well. It was devastating to us. And there was a treatment out there back then that actually I helped my own dad treat elm trees. And I don't know what it was, but I put money on it. It was probably neonics. There's nothing wrong with me now, you know. But the point I'm trying to make is we tried to save them, but we didn't. They ended up dying anyway. But what was interesting about this is there were some elm trees that survived. And those were naturally resistant to the Dutch elm fungus. Those are naturally resistant to it. And now in my own landscape, Jennifer, I've got 4 elm trees growing that have never been treated. And I had an elm tree die near it. Another one over here died near them, but they're still growing and good. So they have to be naturally resistant to it right now. So they're out there, and I think they bred them specifically to be resistant to Dutch elm. Ash trees, on the hand, it's a very new thing for our ash trees. So there probably will be some resistant ash trees eventually, Jennifer. When that'll occur, who knows? I know they're breeding for them. So yeah, good question though. So who's got ash trees in their yard that they're treating? Go ahead and admit it. Okay.
There are some varieties that are now being sold that are advertised as emerald ash borer resistant.
Do you hear that?
If you hunt enough, you can hunt enough, but they're not very many. There are not many cultivars that are, because they're just starting.
Perfect.
The plantings.
Perfect. So there's some hope, but that doesn't do anything for a nice shade tree that's that's dying on you. Yeah. So there is hope, Jennifer. Very good, Bob. Thank you for that. So I know some of you may have ash trees that you're treating, and I know it's awfully hard. A good friend of mine has 2 really huge ash trees over her house. She's a honeybee keeper, and I presented this presentation to her group. And seriously, after that talk, she was almost in tears. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because that tree is a poison popsicle. Yes.
I was also wondering, this is not necessarily about pollinators, but we were talking about general ecosystem benefits of different kinds of things that we're doing.
Diversity. Yep.
So on the off chance that you have a dead or dying tree, are there any, or I'm guessing there would be some benefits to the ecosystem of having a dead tree, like, I don't know, woodpecker?
You know, you're talking my language, young lady. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. She's asking about the dead tree itself. Is there a benefit to it? We're going to be talking about that big time here in just a couple minutes. Good question. You're on the same page. I appreciate that. Okay. So we've talked about this. I don't need to go into any more detail here. They are poison popsicles. Okay. Okay. I'll let you finish taking a picture and I'll change it as soon as you're done with that picture. Okay. Okay. Please leave them standing. If they die, leave them standing. Okay. Those dead trees are an important part of our ecosystem. Now, here we go again with that attitude. Okay. It's going to be hard. Seriously. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more here. A major part of the benefit is still available to the ecosystem. Let's talk about it some more. Dead trees provide a wide range of critters, some of their food and homes, and this includes pollinators. You're going, what? A dead tree is a pollinator home? Yes! Both native bees and honeybees. Okay, these are 2 ash trees that died in my yard. This, those were nice trees. The emerald ash borer got to them. This tree broke off on its own and just about landed on a good tree. You know, I got lucky. This tree, I had a tree trimmer come in and top it. I didn't want that tree falling on another good tree. You know, so I had them top it. Okay. You're going, that's kind of ugly. That's kind of ugly. Yeah, it is a little bit, but we'll talk about it a little bit more. Now, that's one that's been standing there for a while. It's an important home to pollinators. It's full of holes. Pollinators are all over that dead stump. Full, riddled with stump. I beg to differ if that's messy. To me, that's a beautiful part of the landscape. Now, you might not want that in your very front yard. I'm not necessarily advocating that, but you really need to think about saving those dead trees. So your question is right on target. So also, decaying wood is also home to fungi. And they're showing our pollinators benefit from fungi. They actually go out and harvest mycelium, different fungi, and bring it back to their nest or whatever. Honeybees are a good example. Honeybees use fungi in their bee bread all the time. They use fungi. And they go out and harvest fungi. Okay. Where do they get that? Not from the bluegrass. They're getting it from those dead stumps and so forth. Yes, Ed.
The dead trees, do they have to be standing or can they be lying down?
His question is a good question. Do they have to be standing or laying down? Laying down is perfectly fine.
Good. That's all.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't thought about that so much. This tree is laying down, so there's a huge source. It's a good point.
But we do that for 2 reasons. One, so that it's not as unsightly
Yeah.
for the boss. And the other is that I put them along the edges and they hold back water.
Yeah.
On the hillside.
So he's using the trees. Actually, you can do that to hold back soil, water, but also at the Arboretum, they're using, what's David call it? He calls it, it's a pile of dead trees that he puts as an edging around his place, and it keeps the deer out. It's kind of a fence of dead, because the deer don't like walking through that. So he puts a pile of dead trees around. That's good. I like that, Ed. I need to change my talk. I need to incorporate that. So, very good. Important fungi source. Okay. This is a man-made pollinator hotel. You're seeing a lot of these everywhere. Actually, at the Arboretum, they're putting in a pollinator hotel this summer, an Eagle Scout project. They're going to put in one of these, something like this, not next to this. But if you notice, there's all kinds of hollow tubes, different sizes of hollow tubes. And that's what our native bees need. They need those hollow stems to lay their eggs in and raise their babies in. There's a nature-made pollinator hotel. Okay. I like the simplicity of that. Okay. What about other uses of dead trees? If you notice, you probably can't see it very well here, but see that goose is nesting in that dead tree? Pretty unusual. I just had to show this. I discovered this last summer. Actually, I got 5 hives right in front of that tree. And that goose didn't like me there. So, okay. Embrace the wildness. Embrace it. Embrace the messiness. It's not going to be the perfect manicured whatever. Just try to embrace it. I have a friend that says, try to embrace the organized mess. Okay. For example, he was referring to strip farming, where they put prairie strips contoured around a row crop field. That is embracing an organized mess, because those strips are organized. It's kind of messy, but then the row crop in between it. That is an organized mess. But try to think of your landscape more as an organized mess. Embrace that. Okay. I like to call these bluegrass massive landscapes as dead zones. There's nothing there. Seriously, there's nothing there. They're dead. Oh, but they look good. Maybe to some people. So, okay, sum up. Now, you've got a handout. If some of you may have picked it up, but I got a handout here with this information on it. Okay, tell everyone about it. Okay, tell them what we're talking about today. Okay, just tell them to not mow as much. Now, what I'm saying are the ditches being mowed everywhere. The DOT is doing it. The county conservation, some county conservation mowing the ditches. Why? I understand the shoulders, I understand the median, but from the bottom of the ditch to the fence line, why? Maybe there was some Canada thistle growing there. I could see a spot of mowing there. But to mow for miles, the entire ditch, why are they doing that? It's just crazy. It's a huge waste of money. Maybe there's some trees growing in it. Yeah, mow it once every 4 or 5 years, but not every year. You know, our medians, our cloverleaf medians, why are they mowing all that every year? What about the expense? I haven't figured this out. Now, I'm getting emotional, sorry, but I just haven't figured this out. I just haven't. I'm going to be meeting with the DOT. I want Todd to go in there with me. Todd Burris, you're going to go with me to the DOT. We're talking to them about why they're doing that. Okay? Not spray the good weeds. Okay? Not to use as many pesticides and herbicides. Plant pollinator plants. Fun part. Leave the dead trees. Leave the leaves. Just simply leaving the leaves in your landscape and not cut down the vegetation in the fall. Cutting down that vegetation in the fall, that's winter homes. Just leave it till spring, then cut it down. Yes?
Break the leaves and cut down the dead stuff in the garden.
Why can't we?
When?
Oh, when? Spring. Spring.
When? May. Okay.
Actually, from now on. From now on.
May?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you can. Just leave it till spring. Good point. Good question. Yeah, Paul. Here. Yep. We're approaching it now. Very good, Paul. Thank you for that. Leave the leaves. I know Prairie Rivers of Iowa, who is a big sponsor of the pollinator plan. Actually, they're formulating a lot of that and working with us. But they've got signs out there. Leave the leaves. Leave the leaves. Okay. Support the Ames Pollinator Friendly Community Plan. Laura had the code on front, what do they call it, UPC code, or what do they call that? QR code. She had the QR code, but support that plan. It's very well written, by the way. So we save so much time and resources by doing these things. Now, I want to kind of finish up by talking about this book real briefly. There's a copy of it back here. It's standing up. It's called Living Landscape. It is unbelievably accurate in its depiction of what we can do to help our pollinators. It's 10, 11-year-old book, but it's worthwhile to read that book. Library has a copy here, but I went ahead and purchased my own. So, thank you. Please, now I want to mention, after this presentation, I'm going to go to lunch at Perkins. If everybody wants to go with me and talk pollinators, you're welcome to hang with me and we can talk pollinators, okay? I tried to convince Jennifer and her sisters to do a nature lunch, and we haven't done it yet, but we're going to do one today at noon. So please come if you want. Okay? So question, Bob.
I mean, you talked about the wild. Talk a little bit about native plants used as a kind of more formal gardens and more.
Sure.
Organized so that it doesn't have to look like native prairie. It can be very, very organized and very attractive.
Exactly. And that's really what most of us are going to want to do initially. Most of us are not going to want to leave things. Plant in your yard. Plant Dutch clover. Buy the seed of Dutch clover. Don't spray. Yeah, just do it just in your landscape. Dutch clover, violet. Actually, there's a seed mix that the University of Minnesota has developed. They call it a bee lawn mix. And so you can overseed your yard with this bee lawn mix, which includes a lot of broadleaves in it. Okay. In a perennial bed. Now I do a lot with gardening in different perennial beds. Add in certain spots in your perennial bed is add plants that you know are good pollinators. So in any perennial bed, Bob, this is very important to think about. In any perennial bed, in the front, you plant low growing plants. In the middle, you plant more medium growing plants. In the back, you plant tall plants. So in your front, you're going to want to choose pollinator plants that are low growing. And in the middle, you plant more taller pollinator friendly plants. In the back, same thing. But go to the list. All these seeds back here are in that category that you can add to your own landscape in your perennial beds. Okay. One of the things that I've learned in my old age is when I put in a perennial bed, I like to let them duke it out. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to let them duke it out. It's not going to be perfect for that plant. It's not going to be perfect for that plant. But generally speaking, it's going to have the diversity that I need. And besides, it's less work. I like that term, duke it out. Let them do it. Let them do it themselves. Yes.
And because you mentioned an ad by the landscaping company, are there any more ecosystem-minded landscaping companies?
Good question.
Like for those of us who might not be able to figure it out themselves, like is there anybody who actually helps you out with planting natives, giving you advice?
It's a good question. What she's asking, are there any landscape companies out there currently installing more native landscapes? And yes.
Here's the thing called manscapes. Like I'm a manscape, and you call them, they'll come and help you. And if you tell them you want native and stuff, they can help you and install it. And
is that an Ames company?
I think they're out of Des Moines. They're Des Moines Metro.
Okay.
That's one.
Yeah. Well, we are in short supply of them.
Yeah.
But I think actually, Todd, you probably know of, I don't either, not off the top of my head. But I think if you specifically say you don't want things sprayed, you want to let more nature.
What to do?
Probably not. You're going to tell them. Manscapes does. Yep. Very good. Thank you for that. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to write that one down myself so I can recommend it to people. Yep. I think it's going to be the fad. Hate to say a fad, but it's hopefully we can get an attitude change that this will happen. So, yeah. Very good. Good questions, good comments. Remember lunch. I'll be at Perkins at noon, thereabouts. Okay. So you're welcome to come. So, yep. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You all again so much for coming. It's been great to have you here, and I just wanted to put in a plug for the Ames Pollinator Plan again. If any of you would like to join the committee to volunteer, we always need help. All kinds of things we're trying to accomplish to help pollinators. So come up and talk to me or Liz or Paul. There's various members of the committee here. Todd, we'd be more than happy to have you join us. All right, thank you.